Hello, this is Christopher Chan, writer-director of this film, 20 short films about smoking. The origin of this project was smoking one day, smoking a cigarette, and it just came to my mind, what if I made a short film that was the length of a cigarette? And after that, it evolved into, if I could do one short, why not do 20 shorts? Originally, I wanted to do 22 shorts because of the Simpsons episode 22 short films about Springfield. But after doing some research, I found out that there were 20 cigarettes in a pack, and it was hard enough to write 20 shorts in the first place. I ended up writing around 27 shorts, but scrapped 7 of them because I didn't like them. I didn't like the quality of them. This was the first short that I wrote for this series. I knew this was going to be the opening short, and I knew that this was going to be in black and white. But I also knew that this wasn't going to be the first short that I was going to shoot, since I felt that I needed more experience to shoot this. It was a little bit hard to write this one since the two people talking aren't talking about anything in particular. Usually in dialogue scenes, the characters talk about the plot or subject matter, but here they're just talking about talking. It's more about what's being said in between the lines. I was kind of inspired by like Godard or kind of a artsy Martin Scorsese commercial that he did for Dolce& and Gabbana. This was originally set in a more simple location like an alleyway or a sidewalk or side of a building, but I wanted the Los Angeles skyline. It became a bit of a problem after about an hour and a half of shooting because the LAPD helicopter would not go away. It would hover over us for the last hour of shooting. Every once in a while, it might fly away and come back, which would give us a little bit of window to shoot, but we were able to piece together clean audio in the end for the whole thing. This is Grace's first acting gig ever, and I thought she did a really good job for a first timer. She flew in from Michigan, and had I known that she'd be flying from out of state, I might not have given her the job because situations change all the time, and if I booked a location and everything was set, but then somebody had to cancel or something like that, I wouldn't be able to reimburse her for her plane ticket. But it worked out in the end. This is my second time working with Jose. We had a really good time working together on another shirt that will come up later. He took direction really well, and he knew how to say my dialogue really naturally. Jose is about a foot taller than Grace, so she had to stand on a box so they could appear naturally and frame together. I made a mistake of not cleaning my lens before the shoot, so there's some spots on the lens that I had to fix in post. Hopefully they're not too noticeable. We shot the shot for $1,000 in total. It was $635 for the location, and the rest was for the cast and crew. And when I say crew, I mean the boom mic operator. It was just me and the boom mic operator as the crew. I shot this film on the Fujifilm X-E4 after doing a little bit of research on YouTube, and I was able to buy my camera on Facebook Marketplace for about $1,000, and a couple of lenses that also cost a few $100s more. Overall, it was good for the price. My biggest issue with the Fujifilm X-E4 is its durability. Multiple times it overheated. This is waiting for the bus. This location was a nightmare to shoot at because of the sound. When I visited this location, it was the most quiet place I ever scouted. I was surprised how quiet it was. The owner warned me about a pet grooming place next door, but it was quiet then, and he said they were only busy mostly during the weekend. So we shot this on like a Tuesday. But when we got there, after like an hour or so, the dogs were going crazy and the wouldn't stop barking. I had to run across next door to ask the dog groomers to take the dogs inside, and they did. They were really nice about it. And then, like 30 minutes later, the guy I asked went on break and forgot to tell his coworker to keep the dog inside. And then I had to run over there for a second time, but they were really nice about the whole situation. A way to keep shooting while the dogs are barking is to just get reaction shots of Fiona, since a lot of her close-ups don't require dialogue. So we were able to take advantage of a bad situation for at least a half an
With a
hour.
sword hanging over my head. Only until recently, I
And on
realized
top of that,
I haven't had
planes
a
just
belly
kept on
change.
flying over the set. I didn't realize that there was a private
Is it?
airport
Raw?
nearby.
No thanks, I don't
And
smoke.
then to top it all off, there was a warehouse
I'm
that shares the
sorry,
property with
I don't
the
smoke.
owner of the
Do
set,
not
and
speak
they were
of me
using
in that
electric
way.
saw to work. I had to pay
Besides,
him 50
I
bucks
could
to
stand for
stop
that.
working
And
for
even
about an
then, at
hour.
that,
The fact that the owner
but
didn't
I
tell these
always
guys that they
stay
were
one
shooting
half
really
an
pissed
ounce
me
away.
off. It was
Yeah,
just a
it's mine.
ridiculous situation. The fact that I had to pay them.
It's
A
the
lot of good
best I
actresses
smoke. Every
auditioned for this
standard
role
eyelash
of the
chef. Thank
smoker,
God we caught it
and they
early.
did a decent
The
job,
art
but
doctor was remarkable.
Fiona
I
was the
couldn't
only one who really
handle it.
got the
She
character.
wasn't an
She really knew how
actor.
to be expressive,
You
which
want to
was really
speak to the
important
director?
since she only has a
I've
few
got him on the phone.
lines and she has to say
Yeah,
everything with her
I'll show it to you
face.
when you're done
She
with
has
this.
these really big expressive eyes
Does
that
smoking
really work,
relax you? I always wondered what it'd be like
and
to
my
smoke.
instincts to
Not
hire
that it's
Fiona was a
really
good
good, but I
choice
always wondered.
since after this she went on to do a
But it's
play
a
with
good start to
Marsha
smoke.
Cross, one of
I'll
the
have to
Desperate
go decide
Housewives,
if it will give me cancer.
and Cindy Chase plays the old
Actually,
lady,
when it would give
and
me
she was very
cancer.
enthusiastic about the script and played
Let's
the part
face
really
it,
well.
the more you smoke,
I based this
the
story on
worse.
some of my experiences talking to
But I
mostly
might
old
already
people
have it without
I run
even
into
putting
at
a
work.
cigarette to my lips.
Sometimes they just won't stop talking, and you want
Actually, you
to
know what?
seem rude and just
I think I'm
walk
just
away
gonna
mid
walk.
sentence.
Good luck with your diagnosis.
So you just have to stay there,
I'll go with you.
listening to
Let's
them
let's
until they're
walk from
finished.
here. And walking is healthy for you. I should be as healthy as possible now.
This is Frank and Annie Part 1. I waited a little bit to shoot this one. This is probably the 8th or ninth short that I shot. Originally, I thought for this story that the wife was going to be a ghost, and every time he smoked a cigarette, her ghost would appear. But it got too complicated as a story, and I just needed to get to the heart of the thing. So I changed it to make it more simpler. This picture of Teresa I took because Taylor was running late, so we were able to use our time wisely. And when he got to set, I just sent him the photo to his phone, and we're good to go. And this is a very important story because of the 20 shorts that I wrote, that these three stories, this was everybody's favorite series because it had the most heart. We shot this in North Hollywood near the Burbank Airport, and throughout the day, planes and helicopters kept flying over, which made it pretty difficult. I thought that would be the worst of the troubles that I would have when it came to shooting everything, but shooting here compared to waiting for the bus was nothing in comparison. We shot this in one 12-hour day in three different increments. First one was about, I think, 11 o'clock, then the next one was around 2, and then the last one was at nighttime. We scheduled the location from 10 to 10, and the location manager was really friendly about the whole situation, which isn't always the case, as you'll find out later. This balcony was pretty small, which means we could only get limited coverage, limited angles. It was pretty regrettable, but is the only location that I found that was suitable, that had a well-lit balcony, and was a pretty good location. Another challenge we had was the whole apartment complex because people lived there. We didn't know if any situations would come up. One did when a couple of ladies were in the courtyard eating and right in front of us, so they were talking pretty loud. I had to run down there and ask them to move, and They didn't move, but they finished their lunch pretty quickly after I asked them, and they wished us luck. Overall, they didn't have to be too nice about it, but they were nice and they weren't rude about the situation. So I was happy about that, and we were able to finish everything on time. When it comes to the wardrobe, both the actors brought their own wardrobe, and I asked Teresa to buy the two of the dresses for the story, and because they were important to the storyline, and I reimbursed her. I was very fortunate for most of these shorts that the actors brought their own wardrobe. Only a few times I had to pay for wardrobe, and it wasn't too expensive. This is No Lights. Shot this at my friend Carlos's house in Norwalk. It stars Hugo Mejia, and he stars in multiple of these shorts. He was hired for both this one and Execution. He auditioned for both and he got both. This is Carlos's car because I didn't want to use mine. I already used mine in a few shorts already. This was one of the earlier ones that I shot, probably second or third, since it was very simple. No sound was required. I had to come up with a few gags for the story, like using glasses to try to light the cigarette, or rubbing sticks together. I actually forgot to bring the sticks as props, so we had to search around Carlos's house to find something that was suitable, and or else we couldn't do the gag. And the sticks that we found only lasted a few takes because they were so brittle. So once we used them, we couldn't go back. Luckily, we were able to get the shot. We shot this with no sound, so it took only about 15 minutes to shoot. After I was done, I was worried that we didn't get enough for the whole story since we shot it so fast, but we were able to get everything in such a short time. The inspiration for this one was a friend of mine had cigarettes at work and he wanted to smoke them, but he didn't have a lighter, so he had to wait until work was over to smoke them. This is The Smoking Dead. This was one of the later stories that I shot. I had scrapped a few shorts after not being satisfied with the stories. Obviously, this is taken from Day of the Dead and and the sequence where the zombie's talking on the phone with the crazy scientists talking to the army guys. I took that story and made it about cigarettes. For these shorts, I didn't use any makeup artists until this one. I met a makeup artist on the set of my friend's movie that he was shooting at the same time I was. I co-wrote a film called Midnight's Hours that he was shooting at the same time that I was shooting this. So that film's gonna come up a few times on this commentary since I used some of his cast and he used some of my cast. So I met this makeup artist and she did a good job on his film, and I figured I could use her to make a zombie short. Jesse Harley, who plays the scientist I met on the set of Midnight's Hours. Originally, I didn't want to cast him, but he somehow found the audition, and he actually did a really good job during the audition. So I cast him, and he was very helpful. He brought the wardrobe for both the scientist and the army guy. Corey Landis plays the army guy, and later I found out that he played the younger version of Red on that '70s show, and that blew my mind since I was a kid when I saw him on TV, and now I'm working with him. And he also played a small part on the show The Offer, the show about making The Godfather, and Michael Jovanovski, who plays the zombie, was also on that show. and they didn't realize that until they were met each other on set. When it comes to the contact lenses for the zombie, it almost became tricky since some actors are allergic to the contact lenses, so they won't be able to use them. Michael tested them before we started shooting, so I bought two pairs, one for a test and one to wear on set. This is really my first action scene that I shot that involves two people when the zombie breaks free and starts chasing him. And I was nervous while I was shooting it, but turns out I got enough footage and it worked out well. This score I was really proud of because it's one score that I cut in half and put on top of itself to make it more intense. I added this VHS filter very last minute, right before I finished, right before I rendered everything. I added this VHS filter. I always felt like there was something missing, and the VHS filter really worked out in the end. And I got it for free. If I had to pay for it, I probably wouldn't have added it, but it adds a little bit more. Michael originally auditioned for the soldier part, but I thought his face shape would be better for the zombie. And originally he was kind of hesitant since the zombie didn't have any lines. So I wrote this little extra part at the end to give him a line, and he was really happy about it. He also had a lot of fun playing the zombie. He said he had more fun playing the zombie than he would have had playing the soldier. This is Smoking in the Media. This is actually a reshoot. I originally cast two girls as the main characters, but I shot the whole thing myself and did the sound myself. The end result was really bad. It was just a boring coverage. It wasn't the actor's fault, it was my fault. The sound was also messed up since I was holding the boom mic and operating the camera at the same time. So consequently, I had to reshoot it and had to recast it. And I worked with these two guys previously on different projects that'll come up, and I liked working with them, so it really worked out in the end. This footage is from a movie called Chicken Party I borrowed from my friend Carlos. The guy with the axe is Schaefer Bourne. He's an actor I used in this project as well. He'll play a hitman in a later short. The scene needed more than just two guys smoking on screen. It would have been too boring, and it really tied the scene together. I don't think this short would be successful if it didn't have this footage of the if it didn't have this brutal footage of someone getting killed. Just adds to the irony. Do I believe that seeing people smoke on screen will make non-smokers smoke? Not really, because they have to go to the liquor store and ask for a pack of cigarettes. The clerk will ask them what kind of cigarettes, and what will they say? Smoking on screen might influence someone who already smokes to put them in the mood for smoking, but I don't think it affects non-smokers, to be honest. This is Hitman Showdown. We shot this location on the same day as The Exchange, another short that will come up later. Scheduled this location from 11 to 5, which gave us 6 hours, 3 hours for each. We shot this one in 3 hours. It took a long time to shoot this one, longer than I expected since I lit everything myself. I had to move all the lights for each new setup, and sometimes I had to readjust when the light wasn't working. And since I wanted the light to be so low, it really affected the focus on the camera, which made it more difficult to shoot consistently. For the look, I wanted to get this red tint, like in the club scene of Mean Streets. This location was pretty cool since the host was really hands off and didn't linger around the set. They just let us do our thing. And I'm happy about that since throughout the whole day there was non-stop smoking. And I didn't believe in secondhand smoke before this, but I do believe in it now since I didn't smoke any cigarettes, but since I was around it the whole time, I could taste it in my mouth at the end of the day and it tasted disgusting. And all my clothes got really smelly from all the smoke.
Start as a driver.
I cast these guys in November of 2023, but I had to take a break since for the holidays and to prepare everything, and I ran out of money.
When you
So we
woke
didn't
up
shoot
today,
for a few
you
months.
think you were gonna
I think
die?
we shot this in, I think, January or February. So by the time we met, I barely recognized Lauren.
You
I
still
didn't
think
look
you
at his
shoot when
audition
you get
tapes
fresh?
since I cast him.
I've always been faster than the other guy.
And Lauren had a really good audition. He really got what I was going for. His character was cool, calm, and collected in the face of death.
Got a chance.
Justin is the bald guy,
Shot
and
me first.
he auditioned for another short, "Don't Smoke in the Car," and I really liked his performance, but I just liked the other guy I cast more, Jose. But I really liked, but I really liked him, and he had this very intimidating presence. So I thought he'd be good for this part. They smoked so many cigarettes that day that every once in a while we had
Oh,
to
pride thing.
empty the ashtray, and
Why should I let you live?
the only thing I had was a
Enjoy the
plastic
victory.
bag, and one of the cigarettes wasn't put out correctly, which caused the bag to start burning, and luckily I was able to put it out with some water. But after that, I learned my lesson and bought a jar to put all the used cigarettes in for the next shoots. I forgot to
would.
mention the budget for a
If you were my
few
friend, I
shorts
would.
that passed by, so I might as well do it
Make you point your
here.
gun at your friends.
Frank and Annie, the total budget what I spent was
You really
1,050.
think I'm gonna trust you to have me
This
walk
one
out of
was
here not having shoot me in the back?
854. Waiting
You
for the
trust me?
bus was
You're
735.
willing to die for your client.
Smoking in the media was
You're worth that
680.
paycheck.
And
Nothing.
the Smoking Dead
Is worth
was
more than my life.
1625.
Which is why I'm keeping it out of
A
your
majority of
hands.
the budget went to
Now put my gun away.
locations. That was the most expensive thing. And with the exception of a
Probably that.
few instances, I paid the actors $100 each for the day.
Is it
Other
strange?
than Frank and Annie, since that was a full day, I paid
Knowing these
them
are gonna be last breaths you
$150 each. When it came to paying the boom mic operator,
Well, since there's no change in your
it
mind,
was
since
usually
there's nothing else,
$150 for 4 hours,
get this over with.
or a full day, which was 300. Only had 2 full days while shooting this when it came to the
Ready,
boom mic
Bubba?
operator. It was Frank and Annie and this one because of the two shorts that I shot in the same location. This is Frank and Annie Part 2. This is my favorite of the Frank and Annie stories. In my opinion, it just came out the best. And this filter, this color correction filter is a program called Cineprint 16. It emulates a 16 millimeter camera, and I really like the look of that. So when I saw it on YouTube, I wanted to use it for a few of these shorts, and it was like 50 bucks to buy online, and I really like the look. I mentioned this before, but because the balcony's so small, there's nowhere to move around this, and she can't even put her hand on that rail because at the time of the day the sun's been beaming down on it, and the rail is just too hot to touch. There was a big thunderstorm the day right before we started shooting this one, so I was kind of worried that it might affect our shoot, but the weather cleared up really well and it was a beautiful day. Every time we took a break, Taylor would go to the sink and wash his hands because he held the cigarettes for so long after so many takes that his hands got really smoky and he didn't like the smell of it.
It was in my vows, remember?
The dress Teresa is wearing wasn't exactly the one I had in mind when I wrote the story, but There's some online that we try to purchase, but for some reason it wouldn't ship to our state or our zip code or whatever.
Don't try to bring in
So we
logic
had to
into this,
resort
Mr.
to an
White.
alternate dress. This is probably my favorite shot of all the shorts. The two of them in the same frame with her hand on his cheek and the lens flares on the lens. This is Lipstick. We shot this in Burbank near a biking trail that I bike on sometimes. I chose this location because it's very quiet, it's very suburban. When I got there, there was some people doing yard work right at the spot that I wanted to use. So all I had to do was just drive a few houses down and problem solved. The idea for this short came from like noir pieces like Chinatown or something like that, where the wife is suspicious of the husband, and I wanted to make a twist and make the detective kind of like a bumbling idiot pervert, make more of a comedy out of it. Instead of shooting in an office, we shot this in my car to save money. This was one of the earlier ones I shot since it's so simple shooting in the car.
Not what I meant. Could a female
All I
relative
had was
who
the
comes by,
two
smokes,
shot,
and
then
accidentally
close
leaves a cigarette
up.
butt there?
For the two shot, I'm in the trunk of the car, and I'm so cramped in the back that when I set up the shot, just to make sure everything looks right, then I have to close the trunk door and put my face right next to the monitor. But I can't, since my face is so close to the monitor, I can't get a good look at it, so I have to trust the camera, and it worked out really well. Joshua was the first person I cast for this one, and he had really good comic timing. And Callie's audition was the last audition that I received,
Let me give you some
and hers was the most
Do you love
what I
pizza?
was looking for. And they were both vegan, so when we took a little break to let the camera cool off, they talked about eating vegan food, conversation I can take part of. The way I set up the microphone, I put it in between them in the glove, sticking up in the glove compartment. And for the close-ups, I bought a microphone that I could attach to the camera itself and just pointed it at them. I shot this for $200 since all I had to do was pay the actors. This is execution. The origin of this idea was I was smoking one day and it was really cold, so I didn't want to keep my hands in the cold, so I put them in my pocket with the cigarette still in my mouth. And as I was smoking, it just came to my head that this is how people who were executed in a firing squad with their hands tied behind their back, this is how they were. So I just came up with that idea. This is Hugo as the guy who's gonna get shot. We shot this on the same day as the No Light. We shot this like an hour after No Light, just to reset. We recorded his voiceover on the recording equipment inside the house, and we also recorded it on my phone. So we played his inner thoughts, playing it towards him as we were shooting. This brick wall is in the backyard of Carlos's house. I've been to his house a few times, and I knew I could use it. The brick wall is about 5 feet tall, I believe, so Hugo had to be on his knees in order to fit behind the brick wall.
All right. Here it comes. Any second now. Damn, this is the longest cigarette ever.
This is stress relief. The idea of this one is just a guy who just had a stressful day and needed a smoke. I believe that's why people smoke in the first place. To justify their smoking is just to relieve their stress. This is Jesse, who also played the scientist in the zombie one. Shot this at his house, which was very helpful since I didn't have to pay anybody. This is an interesting story. The actress that plays this character's wife I never met. I met Kurt, the sound guy, on the Smoking in the Media short, and he mentioned that his girlfriend is an actress. So, since it's only a voiceover role, I asked him to record several takes of the lines, and he sent them to me, and worked out worked out really well for a person that I never met before. And the actor that plays the boss is Joshua Smith from Lipstick and Smoking in the Media.
What are you doing
I got
out
his
there?
ADR while I
Checking on
was
the light.
on set with him in Smoking in the Media. So it's just killing two birds with one stone in that situation. I thought this originally was going to be like 90 seconds long as a short, but it ended up being a lot longer than I expected. And those are my hands pushing the ships forward. That's my little cameo. It was just me and Jesse for this poker sequence. So he had to be behind the camera to get my cameo, just to make sure everything was looking good in frame. I didn't insist on having a cameo. I just wanted to save money by not paying another actor. Right here is the only regret I have for this part of the short. He right here, he exhales like he's smoking a blunt rather than
What is
exhaling
wrong
a
with the
cigarette
light? Why
smoke,
is it always broken?
and I missed that
Look,
little
it must be
detail
working
while
for
we
the
were
camera.
shooting it.
They haven't
He
called
should
yet.
be exhaling more like a cigarette rather than smoking a
Can you come in
blunt.
here? I need you.
I'll be
Took
in a
about
sec.
90 minutes, I believe, to shoot this short, and I remember I had to shoot this one before I went to work.
Hurry up!
So if we didn't get it, then I would have to either have to call off work or have to come back and shoot the rest of the footage. But we we were able to get everything before the deadline. This is Frank and Annie Part 3, the final story of this trilogy. That's a red velvet cupcake, and the night before, I almost forgot to buy it at the grocery store. At like 10 p.m., it just hit me that that was the last prop I needed to buy, so I jumped in my car and ran to the grocery store. Those candles I bought on Amazon, they were terrible. They lasted like 2 minutes before the wax started melting and overflowing the candle. A lot of them went out and I had to keep relighting them. Teresa is wearing this blue dress, and that was her idea. She took it from the line in the second story that was her favorite dress, and that was a good idea on her part. We shot this around 7:30 to maybe 9.
Who do you know that wishes
We had
for
to
this
wait a
situation?
few hours after we shot the second part for it to get dark. It gave the actors a lot of time to rehearse.
You don't really believe that.
The lights I used for this were
Believe
two
me. Life's too
GVM
short to be in love
lights,
with someone who's not there.
little
Now make a wish
cheap
that brings
lights
you
that I
joy.
bought on Amazon. I think it was about
Can I do something?
I think it was about $150. I think
We have time.
wasn't too expensive for
About
cinematic lights. And
this much.
what I liked about the lights is that you could use
Why'd you get this?
every color on the spectrum, and you can control it with your
It's your
phone.
birthday.
We never reveal how Annie died in this story.
For you,
I assume she died in a car crash or
would be
something.
the first time.
And what I like about this story, it's like a
It's not what you think.
story of grief, and
I
he's
meant your spaghetti.
able to say things to her
You
that
never had the courage
he
to
never
tell me
got to
anything.
say to her while she was
It
alive.
always too dry, no matter how much sauce I added.
I don't have
Are
much
you
left to say about this
serious?
story, so I'll
You
just
didn't like it?
briefly
But
talk
I made it
about
like once a week.
experience before making all these shorts. I
I wish
been
you
writing for a long time, but I had very little experience
First time you made
directing.
it was early on.
I'd only directed two shorts in the past with some friends of mine,
That was the only
and
wish
and I had no participation in the post production. So when I started shooting test footage, I was a little bit worried when I started editing the test footage and wondering why my footage didn't look like footage I saw online with the same camera.
You're so sweet.
And I realized I didn't know what raw footage was. I didn't know what color correction was. So I had to learn all that stuff.
To have another plate.
I also had to teach myself about lenses and f-stops and ISOs and shutter speeds. When it comes to directing actors, the old saying goes, hire good actors if you want good performances. I never had to direct them in a way because they were confused or didn't understand the material. All the actors were very enthusiastic about the script and wanted to help me find my vision for the stories.
Goodbye, honey.
This is Don't Smoke in the Car. This is the first one I ever shot for this series. Shot this June 1st, 2023.
How long we're gonna wait here?
Star Schaefer
Fuck you.
Bourne and
Until the guy
Jose
comes out.
Nicolini.
What if he never comes
I
out?
worked with Schaefer before
Comes out.
on a movie called The Chicken Party, which was also
Not people
featured
with
earlier.
agoraphobia.
I liked Schaefer's natural
Fuck
ability.
is agoraphobia?
He was able to be both
Most
comedic and
of the time,
serious at the
most
same
motherfuckers
time.
afraid to go outside.
This
He's
is the
got
first short I
prevention
shot for this
That's
series,
exactly my
and I
point.
had no idea what I
He
was
never comes
doing.
out.
If I could go back and reshoot any of these, this would be the one I would reshoot simply
You
because
afraid of being shot?
of the lighting. Mostly on the exterior part since it's so underlit and the inconsistencies are just terrible.
You afraid of being
We
shot?
shot this in North Hollywood around
Everyone is afraid of being shot.
8 a.m., I
Yep.
believe.
If he's carrying,
Even though it was
that's why
June,
we're
I
here.
thought since it
Unless
was
he's carrying
early
a
in the
10 feet
morning,
on
the
his
car wouldn't
chest,
become
then
hot
shoot him.
while we were in it, but I
Guess
was
what?
totally wrong. It was very hot in that car while we were shooting.
I know that.
And
but
since
what
it's
if
the
he
first
is?
short
I'm
I
asking you for
shot,
future reference.
I had no
know.
idea
Shoot
that
him in
the
the
camera
kneecap.
was gonna
Remove the baby
overheat
from any
so
danger,
much.
Then shoot him in the head. Are you
We shot this in
serious?
front of my friend Jose's
You
house, and he was very, very helpful in terms of that. Since the camera overheated, I was able to put it in his
no,
fridge
Don't
a
do
few
that.
times so it could
What? Don't
cool down
smoke that
faster.
tape in the car.
This is
In
my
fact, don't
car,
smoke that
which is a
before 10 miles
Prius,
away
which
from
I
here.
try to hide
Serious.
as much as I can since it's kind of
Why
silly
can't you
that
smoke?
two
Like that
hitmen are
cigarette
sitting in a
with the
Prius.
nail over the tip?
For setting up the sound, I
Fills
put
up
the
the interior of
microphone
the car, clouds what you can
right
see in
underneath
front
the
of you. You
radio
roll the windows
and put the
down.
wires
Now
past the
everyone can
back
see you
seat
coming
out
up
of the
at them
trunk,
from miles away. You
then
need any other reasons?
towards
Sure, why
the
not, Pops? Because I
front
said
where
so.
I could put the headphones on and listen to their conversation while they're in the car. This short was inspired by mostly the movie Hard Eight. where Philip Baker Hall gets into Samuel Jackson's car and starts to smoke, and he doesn't want him to smoke. Also, Reservoir Dogs when they're scouting the jewelry store, and Harvey Keitel wants to get a taco. That's where that line came from. I didn't know how I was gonna do this shooting effect when Jose gets shot in the head, but when I saw Jose's audition, he did a little move where as he was lighting the cigarette, he got shot, and I thought that was a good idea, so I used that. This smoke in front of Schaefer after he fires the gun is from Jose. He sat in the back and blew a match as I filmed Schaefer. This is Scent of a Cigarette. The original idea for this was I was walking down the street and a lady was smoking, and I was walking right behind her, and I was just smelling the smoke as she was smoking and walking in the same direction as me. And I wasn't following her, but at the time I had scrapped a couple story ideas as they didn't live up to the quality as the other ones that I were making at the time. So as I was walking behind this lady, I thought this would be a good idea for a short. The two actors originally auditioned for another short, Running into X, and since this short has no dialogue, it'd be hard to find actors to audition for this one. So I just went with actors I already saw before. We shot this in Burbank, a few blocks from where I shot Lipstick. Shot this around 45 minutes. This was one of the more tricky shots since walking backwards. I just kept on trying not to trip as I was walking backwards. And fortunately, I didn't. I finalized all the shots and the trail that we took a few days before we started shooting and wrote them on note cards and used them as we were shooting. The pepper spray that Chiaki holds, she doesn't spray Sam with it even though it's fake. He didn't want to be sprayed with the fake pepper spray. So I had to get a bottle of water and poke a hole in the top to spray him in the face with it. He was much more comfortable with that. This is The Signal. This is the last short I ever shot for this series.
So why
It
can't
was
you wear
another
wire?
late edition. We shot this opening scene in the sound guy's car since I already used my car for several shorts and didn't want to repeat it. I also just didn't want to clean out my car and move everything out so we could shoot in it. The inspiration for this scene was I tried to write a scene with a little tension in it, kind of like a Hitchcock kind of story. Thomas Patrick Kelly plays the detective. I almost didn't cast him because I didn't like his audition that much. He didn't say the lines the way I wanted him to, but I knew he was a good enough actor, so if I needed to give him direction, he would be able to take it and make adjustments. And he did, and it worked out well. I cast Hugo again because of all the auditions that I got. None of them seemed tough enough or intimidating enough for the drug dealer character. And I knew Hugo could do the job. And Dalton was the only convincing actor in his audition to be drugged out or nervous. Some of the actors looked the part, but they just couldn't act the part. This is one of the few stories that I wrote after seeing the location online. I was looking online for my other shorts, and this location came up as I was just searching for locations. So I wrote a story that took place in this motel room. Shooting here was kind of a pain because the insurance cost was way more than I thought it should have been.
Did you hear me? Where were you?
It was about $300, and the contract that came with the booking was very strict. It stated that if we broke any of the rules, they could shut down production at any time that we wouldn't be reimbursed, and that was scary. So there's a few shots that I couldn't get, and for instance, we weren't allowed to shoot outside, but the story required him to go outside, so we shot that in about 30 seconds before anybody could do anything. But in the end, there was no on-site rep. I was just being paranoid about the whole thing, and the only thing they could do is check the security cameras.
Have a taste.
But I still was afraid to break the rules since the contract stated that they could just shut us down at any time. If I have any regrets on this short, it it would be that I forgot to shoot a close up of Dalton as he's trying to fiddle with the cigarettes. I wish I got a close up of his face as he was struggling with them to add more tension. I made a shot list for this story, but as we were shooting, I just forgot about it and just went on instinct. And I made up a lot of shots as we were shooting it, rather than following the list.
They're gonna kill you?
Which on the drive home made me kind of nervous since I kept on wondering if I missed anything.
Especially now.
This is the second short that I hired Haruka, the makeup artist, to work on with me. I needed her to make Dalton look
Man, I swear,
very
I'm missing
pale,
you.
very drugged up,
I'm gonna turn my life around.
and she did a
No
good
more
job.
gambling, no more drugs, nothing like that whatsoever.
Hugo's
That
wearing
works
my
my kid walk
jacket
on stage to get
and
his diploma.
my gold chain. That's not a real
Thinking
gold
of you,
chain,
my
that's
friend.
plastic. But I thought he looked good in it.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, I just need to relax, man. Can I get one of those smokes?
Because you saved my life.
I'll be right back.
The contract for this location also stated that we weren't allowed to smoke on set, so I had to make sure the actor didn't light that cigarette. This is Dying Man. It took me a long time to cast the main character of this because none of them had the right look. The look I was going for was Nicholas Holt in X-Men as Beast, kind of a nerdy looking guy. And after I couldn't find him, I tried a second time, and Josh's audition came up, and he didn't look like what I wanted, but he was a good enough actor, so I just figured I'll just change it from a nerdy kind of guy to an average Joe, kind of like a Josh Hutcherson type. And casting Brock was a funny story. I was on set for Midnight's Hours, the movie that I co-wrote with my friend Carlos, and he was directing Brock in a short, and I met Brock on set, and after meeting him, I thought to myself that he would be really good casting for the Dying Man. So I made sure to keep that in mind. And the next day, I get an email from Brock asking if I'm still accepting auditions for the Dying Man, and I told him the story and offered him the part, and the rest is history. I really like this location, especially the graffiti wall that we briefly see. It was full of props against the wall before we started shooting, so it took a few minutes to move all the props, and we had to move the dumpster from one side of the lot to the other. It rained on the original scheduled date that I wanted to shoot on, so I had to reschedule. Usually, I wouldn't get a refund for the reschedule, and I would have to book it again. But they were cool about the situation, and I only had to pay for an extra hour. Brock made a joke while we were on set that usually nowadays, if you see someone behind a
have to trust
dumpster,
you,
you
Brian.
you usually don't investigate since it might be so common in Los Angeles, and I thought that was funny
Look at these.
since it's true.
Her name is Emily.
I really liked how the color correction came out in this one. A lot of contrasting colors that pop and work
I'm not
against
asking
each
you to
other
do
in a
this,
good way.
Brian. I need you to do this.
This giant magnum
Dies.
I borrowed from a prop guy
can't
that
be
I
serious.
met through the other movie, Midnight's Hours, and I had to hold on to the
I
gun
can't
for a
t-
long
I can't
time
take that.
since this was a multiple storyline shoot.
One bullet?
Brock is wearing a Hawaiian shirt. It was inspired by the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Brad Pitt's Hawaiian shirt, and I wanted Brock to be like the ultimate badass. And if he's gunned down, then what chance does this average guy have to get the daughter back in the story?
You get Emily.
And he
father.
didn't mind the fake blood on all over his
You can't
clothes
die
and
till
on his
after
shirt, and
Thanksgiving.
he drove in and he drove home in that shirt. He didn't even change.
Don't let her
That's my
take it.
briefcase that Brock has. It's a case for a typewriter. There's a really specific note that I gave Brock as he was dying in his last breath. He had to exhale the smoke as his last breath. This is Henchman. The way I color corrected this, it kind of looks like a version of the Matrix with the green filter. This stars Logan Spahitz and Johnny Lee. And Logan originally didn't get an audition, but his roommate found the audition online. They both auditioned, and I didn't know that until he told me a few months later. Johnny's another actor I met on the set of Midnight's Hours. Johnny actually replaced an actor, Sharif, who makes an appearance later as another henchman. A funny story is I was trying to replace Sharif because of his scheduling conflicts. I emailed Jose, who played the guy who gets shot in the car, and he said he couldn't do it, but he recommended Sharif, the guy who I was trying to replace. So that was funny. Logan and Johnny had really good chemistry. I didn't know how it was going to work out since they never met each other, but it worked out really well.
Being afraid of being shot or arrested.
The one thing that bothers me is the boom mic shadow
I think so.
on the door that's kind of noticeable. As at the time I was shooting, I didn't know it was going to be so apparent in post, and I tried to erase it with the tools in DaVinci Resolve, but it just didn't work out. The shadow was so light that the computer didn't recognize it. This scene was kind of inspired by a scene in the movie The Limey starring Terrence Stamp. There's a scene with Nicky Cat and another guy who just stand around making jokes. This conversation that they're having about the greatest boxer of all time. If you're a fan of sports and you meet another fan of that sport, after a while, you'll talk about who the greatest of all time is. It's just bound to happen. At first, this was going to be the final story of the kidnapped girl story, but when I showed the script to my friends, they told me I had to finish it, and I didn't want to write another story for this because I thought it'd be too expensive. But they convinced me that it was necessary, and it actually turned out not to be that expensive compared to some other ones. This location was a huge pain to find. I looked at about 4 other locations first before landing on this one, simply because when I wrote it, I thought it was going to be an easy location to find, since it's just 2 people standing in front of a doorway. But a lot of locations were too noisy, they were on the street, and cars would pass by all the time. what seemed like a practical location ended up being kind of hard to find. But this location, I also had to pay a lot for insurance, even though it's just two people standing in front of a door, which rubbed me the wrong way. That line, "Don't be a bitch," was improvised by Logan, and I really liked that, so I kept it in. This is The Exchange, and I shot this one before I shot Henchman, and I wanted this storyline to be continuous, unlike Frank and Annie, so you could just continue the momentum. The way I shot this was inspired by Heat and Collateral. The scene with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino sitting across from each other, and the scene with Jamie Foxx and Javier Bardem. I showed that scene to Josh to give him some context of what I was going for. Basically, a guy who's pretending to be someone that he's not, and if he doesn't if he doesn't completely convince them, then he might die. So finding the mob boss character was very hard as well. I looked for a lot of actors and none of them could do the part right. So I ended up casting another actor from Midnight's Hours. He's played by David Morales, and I didn't know how he was going to play this since I didn't audition him. And when he did his first take, he was kind of like Tuco from Breaking Bad, a little bit over the top, so I had to rein him in. The way I shot this, I accidentally crossed the invisible line, which I didn't realize at the time, but since Josh is almost basically facing the camera, hopefully it's not too noticeable. If I put the camera on the other angle for David's coverage, it would have been facing the background would have been facing just something that's ugly in the back. So instinctually I put it on the other side. When we were shooting this, we shot this on the same day as Hitman Showdown, and when we were coming towards the end, we were shooting down to the wire to the point where a band was coming in to perform a gig later that night, so we had to ask them to wait about 15 minutes while we wrapped up shooting. So it became a little bit stressful as we were shooting. I have some time again, so I'll go over the budgets for the previous shorts. No Light, that was 100. Lipstick was 200. Execution was 100. Stress Relief was 200. Don't Smoke in the Car was 200. Scent of a Cigarette was 200. The Signal was 1590. Dying Man was 900. Henchman was 1007. This one 1004. And then the last two are The Promise and Running into X. The Promise is 860 and running into X is 952. So I was able to save a lot of money just shooting at locations where locations were very simple, like Lipstick and Execution and Stress Relief. Those were all shot at places that I didn't have to pay for location, just had to pay for the actors. Logan had an easy day that day. All he had to say was one line and just stand there. And he got paid as much as everybody else. The biggest challenge of shooting 20 shorts is just scheduling everybody, making sure everybody can do everything at the same time, because everybody's schedule's so different. It just became difficult, especially if you're shooting at a venue that books other gigs and suddenly your opportunity to shoot there becomes unavailable. Then the actor you're using has to also reschedule since they're shooting on the day that the venue becomes available or something like that. So that was the biggest challenge of all. Stuff like that. Casting this little girl was weird since she didn't have any lines, so I just asked the actors to slate their name and age to send in as the audition. And I chose this girl Anna because she just seemed like the cutest girl. I don't know. And she acted scared really good.
you give me directions to her house?
This is The Promise, the final chapter of the kidnapped girl story. It's in black and white, and I originally didn't want it to be in black and white, but there was so much lighting continuity when it comes to the sunlight on their faces. Something I should have caught
Any news?
while I was shooting,
Yeah.
but
Just letting you know we
it
dealt
just
with
slipped my
security
mind
controls.
as I was shooting it.
We're good, right?
I should have known better since I had more experience at this time. But stars Sharif as the henchman, and he was originally supposed to play the other henchman in the other short. So I didn't audition him. I just wrote him this part, and Corey was a last minute replacement. If you notice that the daughter who gets kidnapped is Asian and the father isn't, and that's because when I wrote this script and auditioned for the actors, I wasn't gonna make it unless I could get the actor to play the father, and there are very few actors who auditioned, and I did finally find an actor who was good enough to play the part, and he was a very good actor, a lot of experience, but at the last minute he dropped out because of his day job. And I already booked the location and everything was good to go, but then he dropped out. So I had to replace him with Corey, who I already cast as the soldier in the zombie short, but I hadn't shot that yet. We shot this we shot this in the valley a little bit before the summer, so it was a kind of hot. The camera overheated several times, and the only reason I chose this the only reason I chose this location was because it had a pool. It had to convey that the mob boss was rich, and we only see the pool for like a second, so hopefully it was worth it. This is, I think, the second to last script I wrote after I threw away a few stories that didn't meet my expectations. So I wrote a few other ones to replace them, like this, The Signal, and The Smoking Dead. Another challenge for this one was the neighbors. They also had a pool, and a bunch of kids were next door playing and jumping around in the pool every once in a while, so that interfered with the sound.
My graduation, in the kitchen every night cooking dinner. When she used to have
And
a
for this
boyfriend,
little series,
she would
this
come home with
four-part
carton cigarettes
series,
for Christmas.
I think I could have written a feature film out of this, following the
Only
same
time she wasn't
formula.
smoking,
But I like the other
never fell sick.
stories as well.
What the hell are
You
you
know, the
still
Frank and Annie, the
Here to help you
Hitman
and
Showdown,
everyone else.
all the other ones, the zombie one, all I liked all of their stories. So maybe for my next one, I'll write something like
Take a
this.
week off, okay? On me. I insist.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Take this with you, okay? Bring it back when you come back.
Originally, I didn't know how this gangster was gonna
See if
look,
I still need
wardrobe wise, but Corey brought this purple tracksuit, and I thought that it was appropriate for a gangster to wear a tracksuit, so he wore that instead of like a typical suit. I actually wrote an alternate ending to this one where Corey asks for the cigarette back and he says he's gonna handle the business himself or something like that. But I forgot to shoot it. I don't know if it would have been a better ending, but I kind of regret not shooting that part. Just in case it would have worked better as an ending.
Does that include me?
This is Running into X. Originally, this was written for like a backyard and shot cheaper, but when I was looking for locations on Gigster, I found this location, and
Excuse me?
I really wanted to shoot here because it was so good looking
Patrick.
with the lights and the tree,
doing here?
Just,
and
catch a break
it was
for
a bit of a challenge since it had to be a night shoot,
Yeah.
so I had to figure out how to light it. And casting again, I got the actor from Midnight's Hours after not finding someone through auditions.
quit.
Even though I only had limited footage of Douglas from shooting with Carlos, I felt he was good enough to play this part. And for blocking, I knew I didn't want to have a shot reverse shot kind of coverage since I've done so much of that in the previous shorts. I wanted to have the actors move around on the set and have more lively blocking.
And
So we figured out blocking as we were shooting, and it could have been really bad since
once is
I didn't have a
enough.
shot list. So I had to memorize their placements when they're doing their close-ups.
Glad I still smoke then.
For Haley's close-ups, I had to use a different lens since
Come on.
it was so dark that the original lens that I used for the master,
Guess.
it wouldn't focus right.
After sex weren't
And when Haley was moving around, so I had to cut in my head on which footage I was gonna use, and could only use the ones where she wasn't moving. I really liked how this one turned out lighting wise, especially since I never shot at night before. All the lights turned out well. All the color turned out really well with the
Thanks.
gold contrasting with the blue and all the lights in the trees.
But I did enjoy
The first day of shooting was
service.
June 1st, 2023, and the last day of shooting was December, I think 18th, 2024. So it took about a year and a half to shoot all the shorts.
Okay, so that's why you
The
can't
total
use
budget
it.
was around $16,000.
What are you talking
Took me about
about?
6 months, I
Just be
believe, to write the
honest.
first 20
Every
shorts.
time you light one up, you're
I remember writing the
together.
first 10 or
Tell you not
12
to toot your own horn?
and
First,
having
Patrick,
trouble
you haven't
coming
been
up
doing
with
this since
the
school.
second half of the shorts. So
Just admit it.
what I was planning to do was start shooting the first 12,
Every time I
and
speak
as I
to
was
you,
shooting them,
I
figure
think
out
of you.
the
Holding a
last
short,
half.
skinny stick in my hand,
But I
and it goes
ended
like
up
this after a few minutes.
figuring out enough
Nothing.
storylines to just keep on writing. And once I wrote all those 20,
Ouch.
I started
You started it.
production. In terms of casting, I
I
cast
forgot how mean you could be.
around 4 shorts at a time,
Apology accepted.
so I wouldn't have to cast actors months and months and months in advance
No,
and have them waiting around.
I will admit it though.
The way I raised money
think
for
about
this
it
was
every
just
once in
through
a while,
my
and
day job. I didn't
it
ask
hasn't been that
for
long since
investors. I
broke
didn't
up.
have any investors, and I just spent all my own money.
Happy.
And I did
sad?
take a few hiatuses, and just to save money from my job, just so I could
Happy
keep on
you broke up,
shooting.
Or
If I had actual investors, maybe I would have finished it a little bit earlier. Originally, I didn't know the order of how I was gonna structure all 20 of these. I think this is a good one to end on because it's visually very good, and kind of bookends the opening one where the guy is talking to the girl, and this one the girl is ready to quit smoking. These credits were kind of inspired by Con Air and Predator, where they show the cast, and I think more films should show their cast in their credits, especially indie films where the actors aren't usually known, and it's a fun way to end the movie. Hopefully you bought this on my website. It's on sale for $1. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them on my Instagram page. Guess you could just DM me or something. And this is the end of the commentary, as I have nothing else to say.